Joining us now, Dr. Rob Wittman, Congressman, Republican, 1st District in Virginia. Congressman, good to have you, man.
John, it's great to be back with you this morning.
I know, it's been too long. I get if I don't get my Rob Wittman fix on Friday, I get the shakes. I really do. I know what's going on, and there's only one Rob Wittman out there. So let's get right to the heart of the matter. Today, you're going to be voting on allowing Americans for 9/11 to sue the Saudis. How do you stand on this? How will it go? Tell us why.
Well, I think that Americans should be able to have their due process to go after the Saudis, who, as we know from the information that we've gathered, did support, were complicit with the hijackers there in 9/11. So I do think that there is a liability there. I do think our U.S. citizens should be provided the opportunity to pursue holding Saudi Arabia accountable.
So you're going to vote in favor of this?
Yes.
President Obama has vowed to veto it. Why?
I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why he wouldn't want to stand on the side of United States citizens to make sure that they have, again, their due process, their ability to argue in court about liabilities that Saudi Arabia would have. He said it would interfere with international relations. I think not standing strong on the side of Americans is a counter to good foreign relations. You know, we need to stand strong, and we haven't, obviously, with this administration in foreign relations. This is just another example of capitulation, which is not the way we need to go about, I think, this type of diplomacy. If you don't address these things head on, if you don't allow our citizens due process, then I think that is counter to what makes for good, strong foreign policy.
All right, I think you're dead right on that. We'll see how it turns out. I mean, it looks like you got the votes in the House, but you don't have 2/3 veto override, I don't think. But you might, right? I mean, for a lot of people, look, I take the layman's view on my show, as you know, and a lot of people look at this and they're saying, okay, so we got all these people killed, and we don't really know what the Saudis' involvement is, and we ought to be able to sue them. And Obama's saying, well, no, they're an ally. You know, we pay for their defense. Meantime, they haven't taken in a single Syrian refugee. I just want to keep pointing that out. So I think you're on target. I think people ought to be able to sue the Saudi government.
Well, I think the average everyday citizen looks at it and goes, why shouldn't U.S. citizens have due process? Right. Why shouldn't there be the opportunity for them to argue in a court the liability that Saudi Arabia has here? And while Saudi Arabia has been helpful to us in some situations, there are other situations where they try to play the other side, which is not good for the United States. It's something that we, I think, haven't addressed adequately through diplomatic channels. I've had the opportunity to go to Saudi Arabia, to visit there with the Crown Prince, and to talk about these particular issues. There was pretty animated conversations I had there, both with the Crown Prince and with the defense minister there, and they're pretty adamant about where they feel they are in the realm of the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And I expressed to them feeling pretty strongly about how we see things in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. That's the only way we're going to make sure that Saudi Arabia stands on the side of good. I mean, they have to stand against evil, and they have to stand unequivocally against evil. And if they don't, then there has to be consequences to that, John. And I think everybody else looks at it that way. I hope that there'll be folks on the other side of the aisle that indeed see this as that type of decision.
Well, once again, you're like the chairman of the Common Sense Express. I mean, that's just common sense. I think you hit it on the head. So, Congressman, deja vu all over again, as they say. So you come on my show every week and you rail against the fact that we never get a budget, never gets done, even though Paul Ryan said we'd have a regular order. That's nonsense. He doesn't do that. So no budget, no nothing. Everybody goes on recess. Everything that you predicted, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, you predicted the whole thing. And you said we were going to get, once again, to a lame duck session where everybody's hair goes on fire. We have continuing resolutions, threats of shutdowns. McConnell says can't get 60 votes. No cloture. Isn't going to end that. And so you're going to get another omnibus shoved down your throat at the last minute. And the alternative is shut the government down before an election. I mean, it's like, how many times does it have to play out? This is like, the Peanuts cartoon, right? Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football. Yes, this time you're going to kick it. No, I'm going to pick it up and you're going to fall on your butt. You get for the 10,000th time. I mean, it's the same story. And you've been calling this out for years, and yet here we are again.
I know, John. I tell you, the only way that this is going to change is for members of Congress to take responsibility on their own, and that means put their paychecks on the line to get a budget done on time, put their August vacation on the line to make sure they get all 12 appropriations done before we leave town, and also in that period, if you don't have appropriations bills done, your paycheck ought to be on the line too. Those things, I think, are absolutely critical. Until that happens, and remember, we have a number of new members of Congress here, so it's not about term limits. It's not about sending new folks up here. Mm-hmm. There are nearly 340 new members that are here over the past 4 terms, the past 8 years. Mm-hmm. So it's not a matter of that. It's a matter of, will the members that are here stand up and say, I will put my paycheck on the line, I will make the sacrifice if the work doesn't get done, I'll put my vacation on the line, I'll make the sacrifice if things don't get done. If not, what happens, John, is what we see. The sacrifice and the burden is placed back on the American people when these things don't happen. That's not the way this is supposed to work. If you were to dream up a way not to run a business or not to run a government, a continuing resolution would be the way to do it. And it's counterintuitive, as you said. I've laid this scenario out, and I hate to say I told you so, but this is the situation where we come back, a limited number of legislating days, about 13 legislating days. Now we're going to be in a situation, and there'll be a meeting this morning where they'll say, Mitch McConnell has said only thing he can get passed is a 3-month CR. I think that even if they're going to do that, they ought to take the security elements of our budget, defense, veterans, military construction, and homeland security, and put that in a budget package where those appropriations bills have passed, and at least pass those appropriations bills for the next year, and then you can debate or have a CR for the rest of the budget, although I hate the CRs and even for the rest of the budget, but at least get some of that done, because if not, what will happen is you'll have a short-term CR for 3 months, and then we'll be back during December, back and forth in a lame duck session, and we know how effective those sessions are. And I say that tongue-in-cheek. They're very ineffective. And I told members here, I said, you better buy a Christmas tree and put it in your office, because you're going to be here through Christmas time, this back and forth. And as you said, it'll be high anxiety, shut down, or else. And that's not the way to run this government. It's not the way you make good decisions. It's not the way to have a full debate about what needs to happen with this nation's funding and what we need to do to address the deficit and the debt. This is the quintessential kick the can down the road. And I urge people as I go around Virginia and speak. I said I had to urge every member to sign on and say, I'll put my paycheck on the line, I'll put my vacation on the line in order to force this House to get the job done. John, that's the only way that I see it, because you can talk about all these other elements about we have to do this and pass that, but until members force themselves to make the sacrifices to get the job done, the easier thing for them is to just kick the can down the road.
Well, and that's what keeps happening. And look, you've been calling this out forever, but you're never going to get legislation passed that's going to tie vacation or paychecks to anything. Dr. Dave Bratt, your colleague in the 7th District, I think it was on our show yesterday or the day before, and he said something that was really, really riveting. He said, look, they don't want to vote on the budget. They don't want regular order. The leadership of the Republican Party doesn't want that. He said that's why Mitch McConnell is able to hide behind the 60-vote cloture, that he has the power to just rescind like today. He doesn't want to do that. And because they want the extra spending, they want all the goodies in the bag, and then they want to throw up their hands and says, well, I can't get 60 votes. I can't do anything about it. And then in the House leadership, they want the omnibus, they want the omnibus, but then they can throw up their hands and say, well, the alternative is we shut the government down. So his philosophy is that your leadership actually is in favor of all this crap because they can get the money to keep flowing and they don't have to be accountable for it. Interesting take.
It is, and I as I look at it, and you look at the motivations across the spectrum, it is indeed, as Dave points out, up to the members to get the leadership to do these things. Remember, the leadership serves at the pleasure of the membership. So it's up to membership to say, listen, we're going to force the leadership's hand on these things. We're going to force members to make these decisions, and that is, the greatest motivator that I know, paycheck and vacation, to be able to push those issues. Another archaic practice that needs to change is the Senate. Now, we can't control that, but the cloture rule is ridiculous. If you're going to filibuster, you should be able to be required to stand on the floor, just as they did in the past, and speak. And that's the true purpose of the filibuster. It shouldn't be that 40 members can hold the entire Senate hostage. And this whole idea to say, well, we can't let go of that because if we're the minority, we want to be able to do this, that, and the other. No. The way the process worked is for members to stand up. If you feel that passionately about it, and there are enough members that feel that passionately about it, they can stand on the floor and really, focus the attention on that bill instead of having 40 members to say, no, this bill is never going to go anywhere, and that creates that. So there has to be rule changes. There are archaic rules in the Senate and even some in the House, John. An archaic rule in the House is that when the House adopts a budget, it cannot address the autopilot spending program. So how ridiculous is that when you have the entire budget and two-thirds of the budget are off the table, that you can't even discuss that as part of a budget adoption? That's another one of those archaic rules that somebody put back in place, as you said, to protect existing interests. So the archaic nature of how both these bodies operate has to change too, but every single one of those elements boil down to the membership having to take a vote on whether it's the rules or whether it's on how the bodies operate to make those changes. And until that happens, then you're right, status quo will continue, and we can all conjecture about the motivations and the reasons why, but ultimately leadership serves at the pleasure and direction of the membership. And that's why, if members say, hey, we're not going to hold ourselves accountable and make sure we make the sacrifices and make sure we direct the leadership in what to do, then we'll continue to see the same things happen. And that's what leads to the frustration that I have and the frustration that Dave Bratt has. In fact, he and I were talking last night about, what are some of the mechanisms, including the ones that I had suggested, in getting things off of dead center and moving away from the status quo, because we know that doesn't work, and we know you're never going to reach any kind of, larger opportunity to reach an agreement on the budget that gets us on a sustainable track to address the deficit and the debt. CR's just said keep spending the way you have,
right.
And without adoption of the budget, we've seen, we have a budget that balances in 9 years, but that happened in 2012, in 2013, 2014, 2015.
Everybody knows that's a complete scam. I mean, and you're right, and I'm glad you're talking to Dave. It's kind of the doctor-to-doctor dialogue here going on. Okay, I got 2 minutes. Since we talked last, you're running for governor. You launched your political action committee. Things are going great. I expected a convention. Now, primary. How does that affect your race?
Well, obviously, it's the decision that the state central made. I told folks it's not my job to get involved in it, but there was, I think, a very good compromise deal that was reached. It's a matter of there being a new state central now, and it is what it is. We're going to deal with that. We are well positioned, John, even in a primary race, to be able to win and to be successful there. We've had great support across the state. We've been doing the things necessary both on the resource side and on the support side. So I feel good about where we are. Obviously, it's a long trail between now and then, but as I emphasize with people, we have to be able to win in 2016. This race that we have before us for the White House and to maintain majorities in the House and the Senate is critical. And Virginia is ground zero. So, for all the statewide candidates, you can't get too far ahead of yourself and say, oh, this is all about 2017, because if we lose in 2016, it makes things expressly more difficult in 2017. So I remind folks, let's focus on the ball in front of us, winning in 2016. If we do that, then what we face in 2017, I think, is a great opportunity for us to sweep these statewide seats, and I know that we can do that.
So you think you can win a primary?
I do, yes.
And so the rumors circulating around that you're going to drop out of the race, they're just nonsense, right?
No, they're nonsense. I'm all in. I've made the commitment to run. We are running, no questions.
All right, so here's my take very quickly in the 15 seconds I've got remaining. You got 4 people in now. I think Snyder gets in. That's 5. I don't see why you can't win a 4 or 5 person scenario. I think you're right there. I think you would have definitely won in a convention. I'd analyze that. But I think you're going to be right there in a primary as well. But first things first, we got to get through November. Elect Donald Trump. We're out of time. I want to thank Congressman Dr. Rob Wittman for being with us. More info. Hey, if people want info on your governor's race, where do they get that?
They can just go to just Google Virginia First Fund. Virginia First Fund. It gives them all the information about our gubernatorial efforts there. It lets them know what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what they can do to help.